Today on the 29th September 2015, we found water on the surface of Mars. This is the first time we've ever found the life-giving liquid on a body in the universe other than our own planet. To say this is one of the greatest achievements in scientific history is a complete understatement. Life on our planet has existed for billions of years. It's all thanks to the water which covers 2/3 of the surface of our planet. And if we're ever to find life in the universe out there, then surely today, the day when we first found water on Mars, will be remembered as the first step in that giant journey in discovery. Okay, so what is it that NASA's found? Well, NASA's been looking at the surface of Mars, and specifically some of the walls of craters and slopes on the surface. They've been doing this with a satellite that's going around Mars called the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Now, scientists are able to use an instrument on board the satellite to detect what type of chemicals and elements are on the surface of the planet. Now, what they found is by looking at these craters and slopes, they found long, thin streaks of salt deposit. Now, scientists have wondered how they've got there. And what's really interesting is that these salt deposits appear in summer and they seem to disappear in winter. So they realised that something's happening in summer to create these long, thin streaks that go down the side of the slopes. Now, what they found is in the summer months, when the water mixes with salt, it's warm enough on the surface of Mars for the water to remain as a liquid instead of an ice. Now, this salt water then runs down the side of the crater in a long, thin streak. The water suddenly disappears, whether it's evaporated or it soaks into the surface of Mars, we're not quite sure, but it leaves behind these long, thin streaks of salt. And so this is evidence that there must be water on Mars, at least during the summer months, when it's warm enough for the salt water to be a liquid rather than a solid. But where does this water come from in the first place? Well, scientists aren't really sure, but one thing we think that may be happening is that the salt is absorbing all the water from the atmosphere. And as the water collects, it actually forms the droplets which then streak down the side of the surfaces, which leave the trails behind. So actually, it's the salt in the first place which is drawing the water together to create the water that goes down the side of the slopes. Now think back to your school days. Remember when your teacher told you that Mars was beyond the orbit of Earth, outside of the so-called Goldilocks zone? Out here, less of the sun's energy reaches the surface of Mars, and this means that any water on the surface is frozen solid. We know this is true because we can see large deposits of water ice on the surface of Mars. This is especially the case at the polar caps of Mars, where we can see large ice caps at the North and South Pole. So how then has NASA found liquid water on Mars? Well, a few months ago, NASA found deposits of salt on the surface of Mars. And it's this salt which we think solves our freezing problem. You see, salt water, like we have in huge abundances in the oceans down here on Earth, has a much lower freezing temperature than pure water. This means that at a certain temperature, pure water might be frozen solid as ice, but salt water remains a liquid. So what this means is that any liquid water on the surface of Mars must have dissolved salts inside it, and this is what's keeping it a liquid rather than a solid on the cold surface of Mars. So there used to be huge oceans on Mars covering a large amount of the surface. Some of these oceans were miles deep, and these oceans don't exist anymore today. However, it does seem from the evidence we found today that there are small trickles and streams of salt water going across the surface of Mars. So if water exists on Mars, is there a chance that life also exists there? Well, this is a really tricky question. We're pretty sure that no complex life exists on Mars, nothing big like humans or animals, but it may be that more simple life and organisms exist, such as bacteria. However, with such an infrequent amount of water through these small streams and trickles, it seems very unlikely that life would be able to exist. And also on the surface of Mars there are really extreme conditions like huge amounts of radiation, extreme swings in temperature that mean that even if these small life forms do have a constant supply of water, it's going to be pretty tricky to stay alive. But that's a problem to worry about another day. Today is all about celebrating the discovery of liquid water on Mars. NASA and other space agencies spend billions of pounds and dollars each year sending satellites and rovers to the surface of Mars, some of which are specifically designed to try and find evidence of water and life. And all this hard work today has been a complete success. And with several rovers still working on Mars and even more set to be launched, there's still lots more work to do and even more mysteries to be solved on this small little red planet. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to check out the rest of my channel for some really great science videos. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Why not leave a comment below about the news story today? Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys all soon. We always dreamt of finding water on a planet in our solar system. We always thought that Mars would be the best bet, but it seems now that all the water on Mars is either evaporated or is frozen at the polar ice caps. But it turns out, perhaps we should have been looking at the moons in our solar system instead.